You know that exact feeling when you're watching a debate on TV, maybe a political panel, or honestly just two pundits yelling across a split screen.
Oh, yeah, and you can literally feel your blood pressure rising.
Exactly. You know for a fact that someone is talking absolute nonsense, but the argument is moving so fast and they're like pivoting so wildly from one talking point to the next that you can't quite articulate exactly why they're wrong.
Right, you're just sitting on your couch completely swimming in this chaotic sea of information overload.
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's unpack this. Because today, we're giving you a lifeboat. Or, well, more accurately, we're giving you a map. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
We have a highly unusual stack of materials to get through today. Instead of a traditional nonfiction book or, a stack of dense academic papers, we are analyzing a series of intricate, highly interconnected conceptual maps.
Yeah, these were created by a researcher named Guy Lakeman using a visual data platform called Kumu.
And what's wild is just how detailed they are.
What's fascinating here is that we aren't just looking at lists of data or endless spreadsheets. These are visual representations of human thought in action.
Like literally tracing thought patterns.
Exactly. Lakeman is taking massive, abstract concepts, everything from the anatomy of how we argue to the underlying structure of the stories we tell, all the way up to the actual survival of the planet.
Wow.
And he's turning them into tangible nodes and lines that you could literally trace with your finger. It's a way of mapping out complexity so that our brains can actually process the chaos without just, shutting down entirely.
And our mission for this deep dive is to equip you with exactly that visual and conceptual toolkit. We want to help you cut through that modern static.
It's so necessary right now.
It really is. We're going to explore how Lakeman maps human behavior, starting from the smallest microaggressions up to massive global systems. So let's zoom right in on our first map.
The famous one.
Right. It's appropriately titled Bad Arguments. And it's explicitly designed for decoding social media battles and those obnoxious TV debates we were just talking about.
It is essentially a functional blueprint of intellectual dysfunction. Lakeman draws inspiration from the legendary astronomer Carl Sagan to build what he calls a baloney detector.
I love that name.
Yeah. And when you look at how he maps out a standard debate dynamic, it has a very rigid, predictable structure. First, you have a proposer.
Okay.
This is the person initiating the argument, and they're often inclined to present the debate using, baloney arguments.
Naturally.
Then you have the responder. Now, the responder has a choice. They can either systematically trash those baloney arguments with logic, or, and this is where the map gets incredibly thick with data if they are in doubt, or if they feel cornered and just need time to think, they go entirely off topic.
Right, they just pivot entirely.
Exactly. They introduce their own bad arguments to buy time.
They throw a smoke bomb, they panic, and they deflect.
Precisely. And the map identifies the absolute most common and frankly most offensive smoke bomb as the ad hominem attack.
Where you just go after the person.
Right. Instead of addressing the proposer's point, the responder simply attacks the proposer's character. But Lakeman's map doesn't just list bad behavior as a general concept. It rigorously categorizes the specific mechanical breakdowns in logic.
Right. He defines a logical fallacy as an error in reasoning that's common enough to warrant its own fancy name.
Which is such a great way to put it.
I genuinely love that definition. It implies that human beings mess up in such highly predictable, repetitive ways that we literally had to invent a whole vocabulary just to label our mistakes.
We really did. And on Lakeman's map, that vocabulary is split into two very distinct visual branches, which are formal fallacies and informal fallacies.
Right.
This distinction is the core engine of your baloney detector. A formal fallacy is a breakdown in the actual structure of how you say something.
Like the blueprint is wrong.
Exactly. The form itself is logically invalid. The ideas are ordered in a way that breaks the fundamental rules of reasoning.
So I was trying to wrap my head around this difference, and here's how I think about it. Tell me if this tracks.
Let's hear it.
A formal fallacy is like a math equation with a structural error. The mechanics are just broken. You put the plus sign in the wrong place, or you divide it by 0, so the equation objectively fails.
Okay, yeah.
But an informal fallacy is like a beautifully written recipe that calls for completely spoiled ingredients. The instructions make perfect sense, the form is totally valid, but what you end up with at the end of the process is still completely garbage.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it.
Yeah.
An informal fallacy has everything to do with the content of what you're saying, not the structure.
Right.
The argument might be formally valid, like it follows the rules of logic, step by step, but it is ultimately unsound because of the falsity or the total irrelevance of the premises you use.
You're using spoiled ingredients.
Exactly. There's a fatal disconnect between the starting premise and the final conclusion. When you look at the map, these informal fallacies are far more numerous and way more destructive in daily life.
Because they sound so convincing. I mean, if the structure is good, we don't always notice the ingredients are rotten. And Lakeman maps out an absolute minefield of these spoiled ingredients.
He really does. Things like the ad hoc fallacy, ambiguous arguments, argument from ignorance.
Oh, and non causa pro causa.
Right. Circular reasoning, special pleading, weak analogies.
Appropriate generalizations. It's a long list.
It is. Instead of just listing them, he shows how they derail the conversation. Takes the tu quoque fallacy, for example, which is on his top 10 list of debate killers, alongside things like straw man and red herring.
Right. Tu quoque, that literally translates to you too, right?
Exactly.
It's when someone accuses you of doing the exact same thing they're being accused of. So, like, if a politician is called out for lying about taxes, they respond by saying, well, your party lied about healthcare 10 years ago.
Classic deflection.
Mechanically, looking at the map, how does that actually function in the debate?
It functions as a brilliant, malicious hijacking of the conversation's momentum. The map shows that the original argument, the taxes, is completely abandoned.
The node just sits there.
Yeah, the node representing the tax argument is left unresolved. By deploying tu quoque, the responder forces the original proposer onto the defensive.
Oh, I see.
Now, the proposer has to justify an entirely different event from 10 years ago. The fallacy works because it triggers a defensive emotional response, completely breaking the logical chain of the original debate.
And Lakeman doesn't just chart these diversions, he literally color codes them so you can't miss them.
The visual element is wild.
It really is. Yeah. We actually get to see the raw CSS code he uses to build these maps in the Kumu platform. It's such a quirky, granular detail.
Very specific.
Yeah, he uses specific hexadecimal color codes to make the structure of a bad argument pop right off the screen. For the most toxic nodes, he uses the code hex FF00,
which renders as this blinding neon yellow.
Exactly. And for others, he adds a shadow effect using codes like hex F87D29, giving them this glowing, radioactive orange drop shadow.
It's a highly deliberate design choice.
Yeah.
When you zone out and look at the whole argument mapped out, the most toxic elements of the debate are glaring at you in neon yellow and orange.
You literally can't ignore them.
Right. The bad logic is highlighted like a biohazard sign.
Oh, wait. This is where I get a bit stuck. If these fallacies are really so glaringly obvious when you map them out, I mean, if we can literally attach bright yellow radioactive warning signs to an ad hominem or red herring, why do highly educated pundits and politicians keep defaulting to them on national television?
It's a great question.
Shouldn't a bad argument just fail?
You'd think so if humans operated purely on logic. But the structure of the map reveals something deeper. These fallacies are highly functional.
But they work on purpose.
Exactly. They are tactical weapons.
Yeah.
To understand why we rely on broken arguments despite knowing better, we have to look past the pure mechanics of logic. We have to examine the psychological soil that these arguments grow in.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Lakeman completely shifts gears here. He takes his macro system and points it directly at the human mind.
Moving from logic to psychology.
Right. We move into his cognitive bias map, which charts out why we have such a hard time understanding reality and specifically the dysfunction of group effects. Why do large groups of people so eagerly swallow absolute baloney?
Because cognitive biases act as invisible filters over our perception. The map shows how our brains take evolutionary shortcuts to process information quickly.
So we aren't even seeing the raw data.
No, not at all. If you have an established cognitive bias against a certain political group, an ad hominem attack against a member of that group doesn't register in your brain as a logical fallacy.
Wow, okay.
It bypasses your logic center entirely and registers as an absolute truth. Your bias validates the spoiled ingredient before you even taste it.
And he ties this psychological mapping deeply into how he tells stories. He has this massive, sprawling map called the Guy Lakeman Story Archetypes plus Jung.
It's a huge shift in focus.
Yeah, he is charting the data flow between 8 basic story structures and over 12 Jungian archetype associates.
Drawing heavily from the psychoanalyst Carl Jung. For context, think of a Jungian archetype as a universal character blueprint that is essentially hardwired into the human subconscious.
Like the classic hero or the trickster or the scapegoat.
Exactly. Across cultures and throughout history, our brains instantly recognize these archetypal roles. Lakeman maps how these ancient psychological blueprints dictate the way we consume, believe, and create narratives today.
It's all connected.
And the engine of all these narratives, according to his map, is conflict. There is a rigid rule he establishes. Without a problem to solve, there is no story.
Right, so he maps out the mechanics of this in what he calls basic tactics and story strategy. It outlines how a protagonist is essentially forced into action to solve a problem that has descended upon them.
Which is the plot of basically every movie.
Totally. And they have to do this by preempting the strategic power tactics of an antagonist. It reads like a mathematical equation for a movie script.
It really does.
But how does this connect back to the guy yelling on TV? Are we basically just playing out ancient Jungian archetypes when we get into a Twitter argument?
Essentially, yes.
Is the guy using an ad hominem attack just an antagonist deploying a strategic power tactic because he doesn't know how else to solve his narrative problem?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is exactly what the map reveals. When someone launches an irrational attack online, they are rarely engaging with the data.
They're just playing a role.
Right. They're operating as a protagonist in their own internal narrative, fighting off a perceived threat to their worldview, which is the problem they need to solve.
And the other person is just cast as the villain.
Cast as the archetypal antagonist, yeah. And those logical fallacies we talked about earlier, the neon yellow nodes, those aren't just logical mistakes. They are the strategic power tactics being deployed to win the story.
That is wild to think about. That our most messy, emotional, seemingly chaotic arguments are actually following a deeply predictable script.
And we've been following that script for a very long time. Lakeman even has a map called the Philosopher's Web.
Oh, right, the history one.
Yeah, it's an interactive chart tracking the historical patterns of influence between major philosophers over centuries. It visually proves how deeply rooted these archetypal arguments are.
So this isn't a new internet problem.
Not at all. We've been having the exact same structured philosophical debates for generations. The only difference is that today, the nodes are glowing yellow on a digital screen.
Okay, but if individual arguments and our deeply held biases and even the creative structures of our stories can be mapped this precisely, what happens when you apply this exact same systems-level thinking to the actual physical planet?
It gets intense.
Because Lakeman scales this up to a staggering degree. We move from mapping a Twitter debate to mapping the Earth.
He does. And to do that, he relies heavily on a foundational concept in systems thinking called stock and flow.
Okay.
This is how he achieves a total integration of these massive concepts.
Can you break down stock and flow for us? Like, how does that work in a map?
Sure. The classic way to visualize it is to picture a bathtub.
A bathtub, got it.
The stock is the accumulation of something in the system. So
Right.
the water sitting in the tub. Flow represents the rate at which things are being added to or removed from that stock.
So the water pouring in is an inflow.
Right. And the water draining out the bottom is an outflow. Lakeman applies this exact mechanical logic to global crises.
And the maps are incredibly dense. I mean, he charts population, looking at the complex flow of variables affecting global sustainability.
A huge map.
He maps COVID disease spread by virus hubs, showing the literal data flow of a pathogen across borders. He has a highly detailed map on industrial agriculture, breaking down the exact mathematical impact it has on the stock of natural resources and the flow of pollution.
He even does a simplified climate model.
Right. But then there's just this one map. The title honestly stopped me in my tracks.
I know the one.
It's called World 2020 or Planet 2020, a planet that cannot be repaired.
That title certainly carries a profound weight to it. When you transition from mapping a localized cognitive bias to mapping the intricate cascading effects of industrial pollution and global climate models, the sheer interconnectedness of these systems becomes undeniable.
You really see the whole web.
Yeah, you see how pulling a thread in one node unravels a cluster on the completely other side of the world.
And he isn't just mapping environmental systems. He applies this to global human dynamics, too.
Right, the behavioral stuff.
He has a map exploring male mind and female mind problem solving, charting how integrating different biological or psychological attributes is necessary to navigate complex systems.
It's all about integrating those different approaches.
He maps out social policies. He even created a simple political compass map, which basically operates on the premise that global politics involves way more intersecting variables than just a binary left versus right.
It's never just a straight line.
No. And perhaps his most ambitious structural exercise is a map titled Global Attributes of Nations. Here, Lakeman attempts to map relationships between incredibly vast, complex national metrics.
It's a massive undertaking.
Truly. He charts out things like average regional temperatures, national education levels, average IQ, all to explore correlations regarding who might be best positioned to lead the world.
And we should be really clear here. As we look at this, we aren't taking any stance on those political variables or endorsing any side of who should lead.
No, absolutely not. We're just reporting on the fact that he's taking highly subjective, often controversial human traits and forcing them into a rigid mathematical structure of cause and effect, just like he does with the industrial agriculture data.
Exactly. It's about his method. He even has a whole section on AI integration into lectures and presentations showing how modern tools can disseminate all this mapped knowledge.
Right. It's applying the logic of a microchip to the messiness of human civilization. But here's where I really need to push back. So, what does this all mean? When you look at the sheer scale of all this information, when you see a project literally titled "A Planet That Cannot Be Repaired," isn't mapping all this data just organizing the deck chairs on the Titanic?
That's a fair reaction.
It feels like writing a highly detailed, brilliantly formatted autopsy report for a patient who is still currently breathing. If the system is broken beyond repair, what is the actual point of knowing exactly how the water is filling the ship?
This raises an important question, and honestly, it's the most natural human response to systems-level thinking. When you see the whole board at once, it can feel incredibly paralyzing.
Definitely.
But mapping the stock and flow of a global system isn't about passively writing an autopsy report. It is about revealing the structural blueprint of the reality we live in.
But how does seeing the blueprint change anything if the system is already failing?
Because it shifts your relationship to the crisis. When you look at the map of industrial agriculture, you don't just see pollution as bad. You see the exact nodes where resource extraction connects to policy, which connects to human bias.
You see the mechanics of it.
Exactly. You transition from a state of passive overwhelm, just feeling a generalized dread about the doom scrolling on your phone, to an active state of comprehension.
Oh, I see.
If a system truly cannot be repaired in its current iteration, understanding the precise mechanics of why it failed is the only way to build a functional system next time. Or, at the very least, it gives you the data you need to adapt to the current reality.
So it's not hopeless.
A map doesn't fix the terrain for you, but it guarantees that you are no longer walking blind. It gives you agency.
You stop reacting to the symptoms and start seeing the disease. It takes the invisible forces acting on us and makes them visible, just like those bright yellow nodes on the bad argument map.
Precisely.
Okay, let's pull all of this together because we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started by handing you a Carl Sagan-inspired baloney detector, walking through exactly how a two-quoque or an ad hominem functions not just as a mistake, but as a tactical smoke bomb in a debate.
Right. And from there, we traced those toxic arguments down to the roots. We saw how our cognitive biases act as filters and how our daily conflicts are often just predictable power tactics playing out within ancient Jungian story archetypes.
And finally, we zoomed all the way out, applying that same rigorous bathtub-style stock and flow logic to massive global systems like climate, population, and disease spread.
It's a huge journey.
It is. And why should you, the listener, care about any of this? Because you now have a mental framework to categorize the noise. The next time you feel completely overwhelmed by information overload, or you find your blood pressure spiking during an obnoxious panel debate on TV, you don't have to drown in the chaos.
You don't have to be a victim to it.
Right. You can picture the connections. You can identify exactly where the logic breaks down. You can see the map.
Which brings us to a final lingering thought to leave you with. We've seen today how human behavior, from the smallest Twitter spat to the largest global crisis, can be charted and categorized.
Down to the hex codes.
Exactly. So if our deepest, most passionate arguments, our most creative stories, and our massive, chaotic global systems can all be accurately mapped as predictable data points and interconnected nodes, are personal beliefs truly our own, or are they just the inevitable output of the specific system we happen to be plugged into?
Man, that is something to seriously think about the next time you find yourself entirely convinced you're winning a debate. Until next time, keep questioning the map.